I will give a formal introduction. Once again, we have Jamshed Dabu, CEO of Trent Hypermarket. Thank you so much, Jamshed, for joining us. We have Devendra Chawla, who is the CEO of Food Bazaar at the Future Group. We also have Mark Ashman, CEO of Hypercity, and we have Ajay Kaul, CEO of Domino's. Does Domino's have a stall here today? No, it does not have a stall here, but I'm sure you can call in a Domino's at hall number 5 as well. But thank you all for joining us. It's a pleasure having you, and I look forward to the interaction. And on that note, we also have the government representatives who are Mr. Gajendra Bhujbal, who is the Economic Advisor of Ministry of Food Processing Industries. Please come on stage, sir. And also the Joint Secretary at the Ministry, Mr. J.P. Meena. May I welcome you on stage as well, please, sir. A round of applause also because we have the government representatives who have come in to participate in this private forum to give us the government perspective and how the government is playing an enhancing role in allowing the food and grocery industry to grow as we go along. Thank you for joining in. I'm assuming you've come in from Delhi, so thanks so much for being here. I will start off with Devendra because he has a presentation so that we can get over the presentation. Everybody else will be speaking extempore. Devendra, may I ask you to give your presentation?
I'm just going to put a 3-4 minutes presentation which will set the course for the discussion. And let me start from where Bhavdeep left. And I worked with Bhavdeep very closely. So I think unlike US, India is in no way overstored. The story is just starting in India in retail. And whether it's online retail or physical stores, brick and mortar, or even the brands in India, whether it's in food space, everything is actually starting at the same time. After liberalization in 1990s, even though there are many food brands, in most categories, we find India is under-branded and under-penetrated. So the whole journey of food brands and retail and online is happening at the same time, a very interesting space. There might be some years difference, but fact is all of them are very young. So of course, as Bhavdeep said, only food retail profitability is a challenge in India. If you have only food retail, the margins are very small. But I think what is important is it is what leads consumption. And today, if you see in hypermarkets, food have a large share, around 40 to 50%. And what I'll focus on, though we'll discuss challenges in real estate, manpower, IT, supply chain, which we've done every time and we'll do it today. I'll just go through the opportunities which we believe can make food retail profitable and grow consumption. So the lens I will use for today's presentation is growing consumption and creating categories. So just sharing some data, people who've shopped at MT occasionally have grown from 54% to 68%. It does not mean that they shop all the time, but they have done shopping once. 55% of the shoppers come to modern trade for deals. They look for value. 35% of make bulk purchases. Large packs are on the rise. And given the space which modern retail has, that works very well for modern retail. I would call it a differentiator. And 30% male customers are also now into grocery shopping. I think private brands, again, is very big in the West. Chains in Germany, like Aldi, Lidl in the West, they have 80% share of private label. In India, again, if you see, India is very peculiar. In the West, the retailers came in 1960s, most of them. And the branded guys, companies from consumer products or FMCG, joined the companies in 1990s. So there was a lag between building brands and building retail. But that's not the case in India. In India, you'll find many professionals from the FMCG side in retail. So building brands in retail is happening at the same time as building other brands by other companies, FMCG companies. So both will grow together. Unlike in the West, where Coca-Cola and Pepsi are 100 years old, and private label only is a phenomenon of the last 20, 30 years by and large. I think that will have huge repercussion on the industry. The growth drivers for tomorrow, of course, are demographics, rise in income, technology, whether technological products or even ease of shopping at POS and checkout counters, improved access to stores, the quality of products are getting better and better, and overall, what it means is the biggest challenge and opportunity for modern retail is to give a convenient environment and engage the consumer. I think engaging a consumer is a really understated thing. Again, I've mentioned on private brands, so I'll skip that. Frozen food, I'll just mention some categories which I believe will work as a differentiator. So what will differentiate modern retail from other channels and which are also high margin, which will go a long way in making the food retail profitable. I think frozen food is a big one. It's growing very fast. Today there was a report on French fries. I personally believe it's the new snack of India. It is even replacing noodles as an evening time meal. Ready to cook is again a very big category, with more and more women working and less time left and between watching your favorite soap and working, women are working more. I think there's less and less time for them to be in the kitchen. However, they don't want to give up the quality angle of that maa ke haath ka khana or ghar ka khana. So a lot of outsourcing has happened, and modern trade can capture that, whether it's cut fruit or vegetable or even the household help. She may do a bit of if you see the value chain, she may do the cooking, but the final stamp of approval will be from the housewife. So when the husband or the kids eat on the dining table, it is ghar ka khana. And the husband may not know which part of it was outsourced to a supermarket, which part was cut fruit, which part was cut vegetable, and who contributed how much. But the fact is, the moment it comes out of the kitchen at home, it becomes a ghar ka khana. Dairy is again very big. India is nowhere close. We are very under-branded and under-penetrated. If you go even to Gulf or even to the West, I think this is going to be exploding in the next 10 to 15 years. We had a small discussion in the last session on fruit and vegetable. Absolutely a supply chain game. I would say supply chain is the biggest challenge to set up distribution centers, to logistically move it, to not have 30 to 40% wastages. Even handling it in store itself is a different ball game. Merchandising FMCG and merchandising fruit and vegetable is a very different cup of tea, and I completely agree, a lot of training is required. I think supply chain overall per se itself is very important for food retail in India. The costs are very high. I would say another big play which can differentiate modern retail is community-led brands. India is not one country when it comes to food. Every 200 kilometers, food's habit change. Even the dal you'll have in Mumbai or in Nagpur or in Ahmedabad will completely change. Every 200 kilometers, the food taste will change. And I believe, I'll just give one example, basmati rice is a couple of 1,000 crore market in India, and it is now branded. Fact is, every community has their own specific rice, like Ambe Mohor or Kolam in Maharashtra. Every rice is worth thousands of crores, but we don't have brands. So branding of commodities is starting in India, and I think that will have a huge repercussion. I've already mentioned on domestic outsourcing. That's for the housewife. So I think to summarize what I'm saying, the Indian housewife is also changing, the consumer is changing, and unless retailers figure out how to serve her best, and by understanding the consumer, you work backwards on how the store should be, what are the trends, how big is going to be health foods, how big is going to be organic, how to display, and then work with the vendor partners is very important, because you can't do it alone. Everybody is trying to figure out the food retail market, and I think retailers have to work very closely with their partners and leverage their strengths and work together. So on that note, I'll ask for the discussion, Shiv.
Thank you so much, Devendra. Thanks so much for your presentation. A round of applause for Devendra. We will bring in a government voice now to understand what the government's views are, because there are a lot of issues, as we've heard. I'll invite Mr. Meena to make his presentation. We've heard, Mr. Meena, about there are laws which could help aid better sourcing, better supply chain management. Could you please give a warm welcome to Mr. J.P. Meena, Joint Secretary at the Ministry of Food Processing Industries.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you very much for this opportunity. I would basically will be presenting before you the government perspective on food processing sector. You have been hearing here from many speakers, and there may be many common points. I would just request, bear with me with some of the points I will also be repeating and emphasizing. This is one of the sector which is a priority sector for Government of India, and every year increasing investment is being made. I would just go through the presentation which will describe trend, triggers, prospect of food processing industry, government support in terms of fiscal and financial incentives, government intervention in the form of various programs to promote this sector, data source which we have from the government agencies and also international organizations like FAO. Food processing sector has been growing annually at the rate of 7.2% compared to around 4% growth in agriculture, and even it's growing faster than the manufacturing sector as a whole. The sector growing at a faster rate than many other sectors, and investment also is increasing annually. The growth rate in the investment annually is around 21%. FDI in the sector is increasing significantly. If you compare the last 11 years from 2011-12 to present, the current year or the last year, say 2013-14, there is a huge flow of FDI in food processing sector. Export has also been growing significantly. The overall export is around 14%, but food processing sector or food products are growing at more than 20%. India is definitely poised for a big takeoff if we see these figures. The notable trends in the food processing sector is, of course, you have heard changing consumer preferences, the wide range of products which are available on the shelf, the taste of Indian consumers is also changing because of many reasons, and one of them is globalization. The rising income, urbanization, young population, emergence of nuclear families are the triggers which are boosting its growth. Entry of international companies. 12 out of 13 global 500 companies and 7 out of 15 Fortune 500 companies are present here. With a large agriculture sector, abundance of livestock, cost competitiveness, these companies are taking advantage of these factors. Rising business and product innovations. The multinationals, international multinationals are developing products which are suitable to Indian taste, and Indian companies are developing products which are more suited to the export market. So a lot of innovation in taking place in this sector. The rising demand on Indian products in international market is boosting the product. The Middle East, Europe, America are emerging as the major export markets. The long-term growth perspective, the strong fundamentals, rising disposable income, sizable middle class, changing lifestyle, greater integration with global economy, proximity to the emerging markets, particularly Southeast market and South American markets, which are emerging as a big economies. There is a huge growth in the global market is expected in this sector. Supply side advantage, of course, we have favorable condition. All type of crops can be grown round the year. Large livestock population. There is a huge growing dairy and meat market. Inland water and the long coastline offer marine products for processing and marketing. To support the growth in this sector, there has been changes in policy framework also. Investment is being made in infrastructure which is required for food processing sector. Launching of National Mission on Food Processing countrywide, and also the framework of the regulation which helps growing this sector, and the various fiscal incentives are also being announced. These are the sectors which are growing. Grain processing, the production is increasing, and primary processing is taking place at a very large scale. Milk and milk products are being processed in much larger quantity than it used to be earlier. Still, there is a huge scope. Only 35% of milk is processed in the country, though we are one of the largest milk producer. Fruits and vegetable, second largest producer, around 18% wastage, huge scope for processing. Marine products, 8.9 million ton production, second largest producer in fish. Consumer food items are growing at very fast speed. Soft drinks, packaged foods, packaged drinking water, alcohol, beverages, etc. Meat and poultry is one of the largest producer and exporter of buffalo meat. Some of the incentives which Government of India is offering, automatic approval to FDI up to 100%, except a few items reserved for SSI. Priority sector, new manufacturing policy which has focus on food processing sector. Project imports for food product machinery and concessional custom duties. Cold chain and dairy machinery is exempted from excise duty. Tax exemption on the profit from business of food processing, dairy, poultry, meat products. Up to 100% for 5 years and 25% for next 5 years. Investment linked tax incentives of 100% reduction of capital expenditure for cold chain units. Warehousing facilities, nil or lower excise duties on food products. There has been action by the government, various ministries and state governments to support this sector. There has been shift in the strategy, development and regulation also to catalyze private investment, massive programs for creating mega food parks, cold chain infrastructure, abattoirs, SEZs, research and development and skill development has been launched. I will briefly touch on some of these programs. The regulatory framework is also being reformed. Now we have one Food Safety and Standard Act, one law, one regulator. A few years back, there were multiple of acts and regulatory authorities which were regulating this sector. An increasing number of state governments are now reforming agriculture primary markets, and a common law is also being advocated in this area also. If you see the countries which were entering in this market or which are there in India, all major multinationals already present, Nestle, Pepsi, every one of you know about it. Then some Indian giants like ITC, Dabur, Parle, Haldiram, Godrej, all are launching new products every year. The new entrant from the Indian giants are Reliance, Bharti Group, Tata, Wipro, Thapur, etc. So this sector is experiencing a lot of movements. The cold chain logistics, these are some of the observations of the recent news. The huge investment in the logistics because of the growing restaurant business. The growth is around 15 to 25%. Our business in India continues to exceed the expectations. Tata Starbucks observation. PepsiCo to invest 5.5 billion US dollar in India by 2020. Chocolatier Mars brings Galaxy to India. Cadbury India to invest 200 million US dollars in Andhra Pradesh. McDonald to bring McCafe to India. So these are some of the recent news which are there in the press. The scheme which we have today, which is supporting this sector, one of them is to create cold chain infrastructure. The government is providing 50% subsidy to the cold chain projects subject to maximum 100 million rupees. We have till now approved around 120. Here the figure is 112, but some more projects have also been approved. 120 projects are under implementation, and the average cost of the project is around 20 crore. So a huge investment in this sector is in the pipeline. 27 are already complete and in operation. There is a huge scope here. If you see the requirement which has been assessed by the Planning Commission is 61 million ton. The present storage capacity is 29 million ton only. So we have a gap of 32 million ton. There are a number of other incentives which are available for putting up cold chain infrastructure. The other scheme we have is Mega Food Park. This is modern infrastructure to set up the unit. The park is designed on hub and spoke method. The central processing center is networked with primary processing centers to source raw material for backward linkages. Around 30 to 35 units can be set up in a park, and this has all the facilities, fully developed plots, electricity, water, ETPs, and common facilities which requires for any processing unit like dry godowns, cold storage, pulping facilities, and other processing facilities are also available on higher basis to the units which will come up in the park. Anybody who wants to make investment in the parks is assisted by the government. 50% of the cost is subsidized up to 500 million rupees in general areas, and 75% of the cost is subsidized in difficult and hilly areas. Here also we are seeing a lot of interest from the investors. 42 parks are coming up on the ground. 2 are already operational, one in Chittoor and another in Haridwar. It's a unique opportunity even for the investors from outside the country. The another program is modernization and setting of habitats. Those who want to invest in this particular sector, here also government is giving incentive up to 50% of the capital cost. 15 projects have been approved to be taken up, and a number of them are already on the ground. We have gone back. This of course already. So this is in a nutshell what government is doing. Keeping in view the constraint of time, I would conclude here. These are the contact numbers and email address. If anybody interested in taking advantage of government programs, we will welcome that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Meena, and thanks for that last slide. I'm sure people will be keen to take those email IDs and numbers down, because if they have to deal with the government, they know who they are talking to. Mr. Meena, Ms. Dr. Venkateshwari, Srimati Prasad, and Sri Bhujbal, who's also with us. He will be talking a little bit on the investor guidance in just a bit when we start the interaction. May I invite now Mark Ashman, CEO of Hypercity, to give your views very quickly, and then followed by Ajay and Jamshed before we open it up to the audience.
Just gone past 6 years in India now. The first 3 years with Marks and Spencer, getting to grips with apparel retailing in India, and the last 3 years trying to get to grips with hypermarket retailing in India. And I was looking back at some old newspaper cuttings, and I did that traditional expat thing when you first come. I had a picture next to an auto rickshaw. But the one thing that I noticed was that there was a real absence of grey hair 6 years ago. So the industry, both apparel and food industry, has definitely given me some grey hairs. What I thought I would do very, very briefly is just share with you a couple of minutes on how Hypercity has been evolving and the lessons that we have learned, and give you a kind of a small prediction for the hypermarket industry for this year, and then finish with one of the key issues that we see along with industry colleagues as the challenge for the year ahead, or perhaps I shouldn't use the word challenge, let's use the word opportunity for the year ahead. So Hypercity launched in 2006. Currently we have 15 hypermarkets pan-India. Probably if we had our time again, we may not have gone pan-India. We would have operated a much more cluster-based strategy. So our rollout strategy, our expansion strategy now is about clustering in key markets, largely where we're already represented, although this year we will get into Noida for the first time. I think the last couple of years have seen us look very, very carefully at the hypermarket model. What do we need to do to get the hypermarket model to operate in India? And I think initially when certainly Hypercity set up, and probably pretty much for our competitors as well, we looked towards the West for our inspiration. And we took the big box that everybody loves in the West, the hypermarket box, and we dropped it into an Indian scenario. And I think 3, 4, 5 years on, all of us have realized that not everything that was wonderful with that model or right with that model has been right for India. So a couple of the main learnings. One was about absolute space. We're now opening 25,000 square foot stores and 50,000 square foot stores, which are looking much more appropriate for drive time and infrastructure in India. And we get two big benefits from that. Obviously, the overall operating costs come down. Secondly, we've looked very hard at the mix of products. We were very, very food dominant when we first started, up in about high 60% to almost 67%. Over the last couple of years, we've been beginning to develop other categories, higher margin categories, such as apparel and home, and bringing that food mix down. And we made the decision this year to finally exit some low margin categories. So shrinking the store size, reducing the operating costs, and growing those margin-rich categories have taken us really forward to the point of profitability and really defined the hypermarket operation for us. But there was another benefit from the smaller size, which I think in some ways is as important as the financial benefits. And that is, it has really required us to focus on what is the customer's requirement. When you have over 1 lakh square feet of space to play with, you really don't have to ask yourself at a category level or even at a product level, what does the consumer require? What does the consumer really need? When you shrink that space down to, say, 25,000 square feet, you have to be very, very clear about what the customer is wanting to buy in the hypermarket environment and be very clear about which categories and which products are really delivering you profit. So I think we've moved from filling stores with products to filling customers' baskets with products, and that's the right place to be. So the prediction for me for the next 12 to 15 months is that you're going to see a number of the hypermarkets who have refined their models emerge from this loss-making phase and enter this break-even and path to profitability phase. What do we see as the critical challenge? So as a retailer, having got the store size, the location, the mix, everything pretty sorted out and beginning to make profitability, that focus on the customer, what do we see as the challenge? There can be no doubt about the Indian consumption story. It's happening today, it's happening around us, it's going to continue to gather pace. I think we will see, as any market does, consumer sentiment ebb and flow. And maybe we're in a slightly lower sentiment at the moment, but it's going to be short-lived. So the consumer story is absolutely here for the future, and nothing is going to stop that. The young, the well-traveled, the affluent, the well-connected consumer is demanding an ever wider range of food. A broader range of food, not just physical choice, but a broader range in terms of tastes. And as a retailer and as a retail food and grocery industry, it's incredibly important that we are able to meet that expectation, that we are able to develop and deliver new food products and bring international food products into India to meet that consumer's growing demand. And here's the challenge. Over the last couple of months, we've seen that it's become more and more difficult for us to import international food. The process has become longer. The costs associated with bringing food in have mushroomed, and we've really got ourselves in quite a muddle. And imagine in December, 600 food containers sat in Mumbai ports, not able to move into the country. And what sort of message does that send the rest of the world about India being open for business? Now, as a responsible retailer, the quality of food that we sell remains paramount importance. In fact, it's the most important thing that we do. And since 2006, we've been working with Waitrose supermarket chain in the UK to import their food products into India. For those of you who don't know Waitrose, it is probably the best food retailer in in the UK. They're absolutely passionate about their products. They're absolutely passionate about the authenticity of their recipes, of the ingredients, and they go to enormous lengths to track and trace the food products down to the vegetables that are in their food products. They know the farmers where those products are grown. They know the varieties that are used. And their labeling is second to none. So the consumer picking up a Waitrose product in the UK or picking up that Waitrose product in a hypercity store in India is absolutely clear about what is in the product that they're about to eat, how they should how they should store it, and when they should consume it. The challenge then that we have is because of the changing requirements of importing food into India, we're currently unable to continue to import Waitrose foods, which is a really challenging scenario for both our customers who are demanding the product, us as a retailer, and I think as an industry as a whole. And let me be very, very clear, we want to comply. There is no doubt that we want to comply. We want to protect the consumer's interests because we know that it makes good business sense to do so. We want to work with the food industry and with all the government agencies to raise the standard of food preparation, to raise the standard of food storage in India. Our store in Vashi was the first retail store in India to be HACCP accredited. It's an internationally recognized award for storing and selling of food products. We have our own repack center just outside Mumbai, and in a month's time, that will be also HACCP accredited. So as a retailer, we see the consumer's interest and we see raising the quality of food as absolutely paramount. But as an industry, we really, really need to find a way to be able to work in partnership with the various government agencies to allow us to responsibly bring in international food that meets our consumers' requirements in the future. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Mark. So obviously, long distance to you will have a long distance to cover, and I'm glad this forum brings together the industry as well as the government representatives, so that there is a dialogue in trying to understand the challenges that you face. And I'm hoping those questions will be answered. May I request, because Jamshed says that he has very less to speak, so either way, it doesn't matter. Okay, all right, we'll go with Ajay Kaul, CEO of Domino's. The brand does not need any introduction. It's the quickest way to satisfy hunger. And as their tagline says, hungry kya? So yes, we are hungry, right, Ajay? So you need to quickly give your views.
Yeah, make it quick and snappy. Good afternoon, everybody. For everybody's introduction of mine is CEO Jubilant Foodworks. We have two brands, Domino's Pizza and Dunkin' Donuts. Why I wanted to still bring Dunkin' Donuts into it, because it's still small, but you should know that that's another brand which we have brought to the country, and it should come to Bombay soon, in the next 2-3 months. Food service is such a small percentage still of this big food and grocery. I was thinking that I'm probably an insignificant part sitting on this dais, and our illustrious friends here, are more capable, more knowledgeable to speak on a subject like this. So I will try to restrict myself, and since time is short, to food service, and I'll come to that but in a moment, because the moment this topic was thrown at us, it left me thinking that opportunity of food and grocery serving a billion, and I went reverse way, that are there a billion people in this country who, we are trying to serve here? And obviously, when you look at, through any lens today, any segmentation exercise, whether it's on income basis or even you build filters of qualification, or whatever jobs they do and so on and so forth, there aren't a billion people. There aren't. And it becomes that much more relevant because in the last month, year and a half, we have seen some severe downturn, call it recession as some would, which is trying to hit us. So are we actually looking at 1 billion people, or is it a much smaller group? To that, when I did some math back of envelope and so on, and I picked up the most relevant, segmentation exercise based on income, which is that BCG NCAR study, where there are the elites, there are these affluent aspirers, and the last bit is the strugglers. There's a good 50% of the total market which is sitting in that strugglers today as we speak. But any exercise, and I'm not saying optimistic exercise, any exercise, I think the country is in almost an irreversible vector today where we are going to realize that there are 1 billion odd people sitting there. So the migration from strugglers into the aspiring, whether it is the urban or the rural aspirer, or whether it's into the affluent group where there are these, again, rural, and urban and so on, and eventually the elite. I think eventually we are going to have 1 billion people in the next few years. So there is that opportunity. 80 Kearney index and all that has relegated us from number 1, number 2 positions, which we had a few years back, to around 14th today, which again may confuse some people. Our own experience, and I'll probably dwell on that a bit more, in detail when we are sitting there and taking questions. The opportunity in the hinterland, and when you look at India at an aggregate level, is still intact, we believe, and I've said this in various forums in the past. So opportunity is there. Food and grocery, in each one of these segments I was talking about, anything from around 17-18% contribution to the total consumption, going up to as much as 40-45% in the strugglers category, it is still there, and it is the largest consuming category. So to my mind, the challenge for the industry is not to bring this category to the forefront, but it is more to kind of ensure that how food and grocery gets its due by migrating, people from, call it unorganized to the organized, or from traditional onto, modern. The whole consumption, is going to grow by nearly, let's say, 3.5-4 times in the next 10 years. The food is also going to grow at around 2.5-3 times. So it is not that it's one versus the other. It's only a question of which basket grows faster and so on. So there is opportunity, and there are some definitive, steps which especially the larger food and grocery players are taking, and clearly with government's help in terms of facilitating, whether it's in the food processing area, infrastructure creation, it's going to happen. Coming to food services, 15% of the total food and grocery, that's it, is what food services today. Around 50 billion, versus probably a 270, 300 billion is the total food and grocery. There are varying estimates, but that's the number. Growing at around 11-12% at an aggregate basis, but I think a 15% number is too small. When you look at USA, just as a placeholder, in a couple of years' time, the out-of-home consumed food in the US will be almost as big as the total food, consumed at home or in other various forms. In China, that number probably is 40 and 60, if not, as is in 50-50 in the case of US. In India, it's 15-85. So to my mind, with various changes that are happening at the demographic level, whether it is in terms of increasing incomes, whether it is in terms of urbanization, where from a 20-25% urbanization levels, we'll probably hit 40% levels by 2025, 2030, whether it is in terms of working women as a significant portion of the working class. As a result, how, again, there are going to be some tectonic shifts in the way consumption happens in the food service area. And you could even logically take it a bit into the lifestyle zone, especially when we talk of this huge youth group who are going to become a huge consuming class as well. Generation I, Generation Next, you may choose to call it by any name. But clearly for them, living for today, consuming for today, lines of credit are clearly not saving for future as much as probably, which has got its own ramifications, you may argue, but their definitive impact on consumption of food service is huge. So convenience, by internationalization and globalization, there are again going to be ramifications in terms of the kind of food services that are going to evolve, whether it is, bringing in global palettes into the country. More and more of the Mexican, the Chinese was always there, but so many other formats are going to come in. Cuisine classes are going to come in. The quick service restaurants also, which today form a significant portion of the food service industry, I think while they will continue to grow at a very, very fast pace, but the other formats, whether it's the fine dining, whether it is the casual dining and so on, one of the formats which is coming up very, very fast is the fast casual format. And that is something which is again a trend picked up from abroad. So that is, to my mind, is also going to play a big role. One concluding thought I want to leave with the group before I pass on the baton to Jamshed is the evolution of food service in India has been atypical, has been different from the way it has happened in other parts of the world. When we, around 15, 17 years back, along with our illustrious friends from McDonald's, KFC, let's say Pizza Hut and so on came in, the pop and mom infrastructure, stores, call it the ecosystem around quick service or fast food, or call it westernized cuisine consumption in India, was almost non-existent. So unlike the way it went about in other countries, we are nearly 50-70% of the total space today. Unlike what happened in, let's say, the West or even European or Asian countries, where the proliferation of mom and pop stores brought in the categories, and it was only over a period of time that the branded players came in. So to that extent, there's a lot of work which we need to still do at a category level, which means penetration as well as frequency. And to my mind, that's a task if everybody entails upon, and including some local QSR players, which I think have a huge opportunity of taking brands global, whether it's South Indian cuisine, whether it's North Indian cuisine and so on. I think to get to a 45-50%, of total food service becoming organized firstly, and food service as a part of the food and grocery bill jumping up from 15%, to my mind, to 25-30% in the next 10-12 years is something which is doable. So there's a huge opportunity sitting there. Thank you.
All right. Thanks so much, Ajay, for those inputs about the quick service restaurant. I know you're in minority, but I'm sure your view matters, and the next two sessions we'll have more of you. Jamshed, in your provocative self, may I ask you to take the podium and make sure that everyone gets a bit revved up to ask a few questions after this as well.
Yeah, so good afternoon to everybody. I'm Jamshed. I look after the Star Bazaar business. Like you requested me to be provocative, so I will do that. See, in my view, the country is moving. And the country is moving at a fairly rapid pace, despite the private sector players sitting at least on this podium. Let me explain to you with an anecdote. So I stay in South Bombay in a place called Colaba, and next to me is the Colaba market, which has got a lower middle class population, pretty crowded. Market is on the street. And a few years ago, in that corner there used to be a guy selling bhajia, the one which is made out of recycled oil, and Sikh boti. The other day I went and I saw a reasonably hygienic stall outside, and guess what he was selling? Pasta. Now, so I asked him, boss, ye pasta kya ho gaya yaar? What happened to your bhajia and the Sikh boti? He said, this is the changing taste. And I am just capitalizing on that taste. Now, who's pushing pasta? The FMCG companies are not necessarily pushing pasta. But you go to Vashi, in the wholesale market, there is a semi-wholesale section where end consumers can buy, and they sell loose stuff. And one of the loose stuffs they are selling is, guess what? Pasta. And you go to a hypermarket or a superstore today, and you will find packaged pasta selling. Who's pushing pasta? I know Italians are favorites in India, but they are also not pushing pasta. But the Indian consumer is consuming pasta. And the question, therefore, is that in many, many areas, consumers are creating their own opportunity. You can look at iShakti, you can look at 24-letter mantra. They are not creating markets. They are not changing consumer behavior and consumer pattern. The consumer is evolving, the consumer is getting exposed, the Indian consumer is smart, the Indian consumer knows what she or he wants. And I think the challenge to us is actually a lesser challenge, and it is to capitalize on this movement, as opposed to try and be sanctimonious to say that either we are causing this movement or we need to drive consumers to change. We don't need to drive consumers to change. And the same is true with the government. I think the government is doing more than enough. There is enough opportunity created by the government, and like we've always seen, in the least expected time, the law changes without too much of a fuss. If you look at the food landscape, if you look at the QSR landscape today in the country, it is totally different from where we were 10 years ago. There's no problem. Okay, initially there'll always be some protests and some guys will break a few glasses, but there is really no problem. And the beauty of this entire movement, which is led by consumers, without consumers standing on the rooftop and shouting, is it has the potential of changing the face of the Indian economy. And the one simple reason why it has the potential of changing the face of the Indian economy is because retail, QSR, and to an extent hotels are virtually the only industries which today are generating urban employment. And when I say urban, I mean urban, semi-urban, and even to the extent semi-rural. Who else is generating employment? Are we getting more steel plants coming up? Are the auto sector under capacity? It is this industry which, according to me and its allied industries, which will not only generate employment to a very large extent, and employment breeds its own consumption. The more you have employment, the more consumption it breeds. But it is this industry which will constantly keep adding value to raw material, because that's where the headroom is. So to my mind, I think whatever anyone can rate us, I think this is a quiet gold mine sitting here. And the problem is with our relative inability to take advantage of this great opportunity that our country has provided us. And if that's provocative enough, then I'll end my session. Thanks.
All right, so there's always optimism in the air. Before we throw it open for questions, I know Mr. Bhujbal wants to showcase the investor friendliness element of the government. As you said, government is not an issue. They have done many changes. While you pull up the internet with their help, you can go to the podium, sir. I'll open it up to the audience. You can go to the podium so that you can pull up the opposite side. Questions, I know you have many. I'll just kick it off with one sort of a lay of the land, is that everybody talks about the opportunity, great potential, 1 billion people. Why is it not seemingly so booming? Is it all about the macroeconomic environment? One quick word from you, Jamshed, before I throw it open.
Just can you give me the last part again?
The fact that everybody's talking about the great opportunity, but the industry seemingly is not booming from the whole economic environment perspective. Is it purely related to the macro factors, or you think consumer is completely oblivious of the way the macro factors are playing out?
You know, I think our definition of the industry is not booming. But our industry is only occupying 5% of the total space. So it is not as if the consumption is not booming. I think if you read again, you saw the presentation on food processing. That's going up. Just recently, I read an article on potato chips and how that consumption has shot up. So according to me, the overall industry is fine. We are occupying a small portion of the industry. So if we are saying that we are circumspect and not going fast enough, I think the issue could be more us than that. That is my view.
But the pie has to grow, so there are questions. Yes, sir. Can you just go ahead? Just stand and they'll give you a mic. Yeah. Keep your questions short if you can, please. We have very little time.
So I'm V.N. Dalmia, chairman of Dalmia Continental. Now, what is the percentage of modern trade food retail in total food retail? That's one question. Second question is for Mr. Meena, if he knows, because this also relates to the Ministry of Agriculture. What is the reason that our domestic production of edible oils is not keeping pace with domestic demand? And I have a question in particular about groundnut oil, because it's a fairly healthy oil, and it's been flat or declining. Third question.
So can we just keep it to two, so
right.
that in the interest of time, Mr.
right.
Meena, would you like to take that at first about the production of vegetable oil?
You are correct, actually. Our majority of demand of edible oils is being made through imports only. But there was time when we were almost self-sufficient in food oilseed production. The tariff structure which we negotiated with WTO has actually done the damage, because at that time soybean tariff was fixed as 47%, and we were protecting the domestic production by imposing duty of 150%. So drastically in late 90s, the duty came down. As a consequence, the domestic price of oilseed crashed in the market and the farmers virtually shifted to the other stable crops. Thereafter, unfortunately, we could not give the assurance to the farmers that you will be receiving the remunerative price of your product, and we became import oriented. And there were other many factors which played, of course, opening of economy and general lowering of the tariffs and all those things. So somehow then there was a boom in the production of cereals, and we started exporting. There was good price, MSP was increased, it is more stable crop. The weather vagaries also less likely to affect these crops, whereas the oil seeds are more likely to be affected by pest and other problems. So farmers over a period of time switched over to the more assured income in terms of food grain production.
All right. May I request you to post this session? You can spend some time with Mr. Meena. We can put on to some more questions. Anybody in the audience? Yes, sir, on the right. On the right here, the one in the check shirt. Yeah, please can you stand up so that they can. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, good afternoon. My question is to the CEO of Hypercity. Yeah, good afternoon, sir. So I would like to ask you whether there's a scope of convenience store in just 1,000, 1,200 square feet in India, because I have never seen anybody talking about convenience store in the country. Is it because that there's a huge challenge to overcome that there's a huge real estate challenge, or is it because the margins are very low on the Indian products to manage the fixed cost to run the store? Because there are many mega markets and hypermarkets are coming up, but I don't see any international brand of convenience store till today in the country.
Mark?
Okay, so if I understood the question, it was around convenience stores?
Yes.
Okay. So I think Hypercity, I think along with other retailers have kind of looked at the market closely, looked at what's happened internationally. For us, we feel that a hypermarket of about 50,000 square feet and a compact hypermarket of about 25,000 square feet look to be about right for the Indian market. Now, we also feel that there might be something just a little bit smaller, around 15 to 18, but we're just beginning to have a look at that. The work that we did didn't support opening a convenience store in the way perhaps you described. So we had a look at 1,000 square foot, 2,000 square feet. We looked at everything. I think one of the reasons for us that it wasn't working is the level of presentation and quality that we want to offer in the store. So the amount of chilled space that we were having. So one of the issues was the electricity costs of running a smaller store, plus generally the absolute occupancy costs. So I think unless we were to go down perhaps some franchise type model where the real estate costs would be taken care of separately, we couldn't see ourselves getting a smaller model to work. But like you, I'm aware that many international retailers have got a mixture of small convenience stores and larger stores as well.
All right.
Thank you, sir.
I know. We'll take one more question before I go to Mr. Bhujbal because he wants to showcase the investor. Yes, ma'am. One lady with the raised hand. Yes. Could you just stand so that people can see you?
My name is Neha Simla. I'm with the Worldwide Fund for Nature in India. My question is for Mr. Devendra Chawla as well as Mark Ashman. For the Indian food and grocery industry to tweak its approach to sustainability standards, like say an MSC in marine, as the Marine Stewardship Council or RSPO. Do standards like that with the global experiences of the country?
You said you're from WWF.
Yes, I am.
So she wants to ask you about bringing in sustainability standards which are known globally.
So I think the retail industry and sustainability will grow in line with the whole country overall. One industry can't just grow alone. We at Future Group, we are working with World Wildlife Fund very closely. In fact, on the 4th and the 5th, the RAI session, we're going to represent on sustainability. But it's a phenomenon in India which is taking place. And see, we, by and large, 80-90% of our products we sell is other brands. So brands have to partner. And companies like Levers and all have made a very big start in that. So I think over a period of time, of course, even retail will embrace sustainability.
No, I suppose if only all that I would add would probably be from my experience with Marks and Spencer, which in terms of sustainability and fair trade and those various initiatives was probably second to none. So I understand how it works. I would say I'm sure that it will come in time and it will become important in time, specifically to that growing affluent middle class, so the Hypercity customer. For us at the moment, it is very early days. So we're beginning to just do a little bit of fair trade, but currently we haven't moved any further than that. But it will come.
All right, Mr. Bhujbal, would you want to quickly showcase the investor site if it's on?
Since quite a number of
Let him
foreign
just quickly
investors are there in this session, and foreign direct investment is one of the priority sector, I thought what kind of assistance that we are giving, I should elaborate. Mr. Meena has already told you what is the kind of fiscal incentive that is offered by the government. But in terms of information, what we have done is, very recently, we have launched an investors portal. We have been assisting investors, foreign investor, in terms of information which we share through the portal, sector and state-specific information. Then we help in terms of locating joint venture partners. We also expedite regulatory approvals and also offer hand-holding services. We have launched very recently an investor portal which can be accessed through our website, mofpi.nic.in. I would request if you require any assistance from us, you can put your query in the investor query segment of our website.
Go ahead.
This is the investor portal. This is investor portal. From this you can get all this information, how to invest, where to invest, what are the regulatory requirements, what are the fiscal incentives. All this information will be available. In the investor query, you can put your query, specific query, and we will be happy to respond to your query. All these both are available in our website, mofpi.nic.in. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. Good initiative. Go ahead, sir.
Good afternoon. This question is for Mr. Meena. Mr. Meena has said that after the new food law has come, the complete food sector has been brought under one umbrella, that is FSSAI. But there is still a confusion because Ministry of Consumer Affairs has its own say. Like they have fixed standards on food, like for example, water, Coca-Cola, like for drinks, beverages, for baby food, cereals, they have fixed the standard. When you go to FSSAI, they say this standards has been fixed by Ministry of Consumer Affairs. So, and FSSAI says now we are one umbrella, but when you come to weights or many things, the Ministry of Consumer says no, this is our department. So we as a food sector find ourselves running to many industry. Actually it is one umbrella, but when you go out in the rain, you see that one umbrella doesn't help you. You need 5 umbrellas to protect yourself, which is actually not good for the industry.
Okay, multiple agencies. Mr. Meena, very quickly. The multiple agencies they have to eventually deal with.
You are right to some extent that as far as various aspects of food like weight and all these things are concerned, BSI also comes into play. And in packaged drinking water is basically the BSI standards which are prevailing today. But the food safety aspect is entirely looked after by the FSSAI, standards and food safety. This was earlier with many agencies and there were many laws. But now it has been brought under one law and FSSAI is trying to develop standards in tune with the international standards and to standardize them uniformly so that there is least trouble to the business operators who enter in this sector. I do agree it's a transition still. We are switching over to the new system and there are a lot of problems. We have been consistently interacting with the FSSAI, the problems being faced by the industry, and they have been acting on it, but still a lot to be done.
My question was sparked by such a wonderful group of people here for the entire panel. My name is Sachin Bar from Chandu Halwai. And my question was because you mentioned HACCP and you mentioned the home consumption and provocative questions and food service. So I just was querying to all the modern trade heads here, what the role of food service as such. You have bakeries, you have other ready foods for the customer which they can consume or take ready home, not staples, not FMCG packed products. So what role do you see for that in your stores, and whether that's just is it a path to profitability or is it just a service for the customer?
No, I think it's a service proposition to the consumer. Any path to profitability will always be through service to the consumer. So it's certainly an important aspect of the offering, which is why it is there, and it can only grow, in the Indian context.
I think it's huge. To my mind, it's very big. Not only do we sell, Chandu Halwai, but if you come to overall food services, if you go to food hall or food bazaars within big bazaars, you'll find a lot of live kitchens. And we are furiously trying to grow that business because that's very, very important. People want to consume on-premise. People want to take it home. And I think it's actually one of the fastest growing business for us. And it's a serious affair because it's actually the highest margin business in food. It's actually double than the otherwise food retail margins.
Thank you.
I'll just take it because Mr. Dalmia is very unhappy and I've been looking at him. He asked a question, the first one has not got answered. So food retail would be only 4-5% of overall retail. But that hides behind it that in new age categories like pasta or toilet cleaners or cornflakes, it's 40 to 50%. Yeah. In olive oil itself, which we deal with you, it'll be very large. It'll be 50%. So it all depends which category. If you talk of only atta, dal, chini, shakar, of course it will be less. But if you talk of new age categories like Matic wash and all that, very high. Anti-aging cream, 60%. Body wash, hand wash, 45-50%. So it's category by category.
All right, now I have to wrap this up because I'm told the more we talk here, the lesser your lunch time is. Already it's reduced to 5 minutes. And one of the next guys is Ajay in the next session. So that's why you have to prescribe to fast food. But I must